Okay, continuing back to Act 1, Scene 2, we went over just now that speech by Claudius, sort of justifying why he's married Gertrude and why everybody's got to move on. Of course, Hamlet is not moving on, um, and we see his attitude here, which I talked about. And this important line, not so, my lord, I am too much in the sun. And we talked about what sun could mean. Could mean. And then we have Hamlet's mommy, Gertrude. Hamlet, cast thine ided color off, and let thine eye look like a friend on Denmark. Do not forever with thy veiled lids seek for thy noble father in the dust. Thou knowest 'tis common, all that lives must die, passing through nature to eternity. Here she is trying to comfort her son, trying to explain away his feelings. She's emotionally doting, some would argue. And he agrees, but not really. I, madame, 'tis common. And then seams. The last thing I mentioned was this idea of seams. There could be a pun, as in seams having to do with, um, um, clothing um, and what's the word I'm looking for? In sewing, a seam is what holds things together. For Hamlet, things are no longer being held together as much as they were. His world is sort of coming apart at the seams, as the saying goes. And this brings up this important theme of appearance versus reality. This play really, well, it's already introduced this theme, like, is the ghost real? Or is the ghost just a shade of something? Or is it a hallucination? What is real? What's an appearance? How can we know? Hamlet, again, looks upon this speech by Claudius, knows it's a political sham, but everybody's buying into it because it appears to be like everything's cool, and if it was produced on stage, everything would sort of look bright and lively. And Hamlet's contrasting that with his black costume. And, the reality of the situation is that, things are pretty messed up in the state of Denmark. And Hamlet knows this. And Hamlet is about to be informed of the ghost that was seen in Act 1, Scene 1. Here, King Claudius just does more to piss off Hamlet. He basically says, if you're continuing to warn, you are being, it shows a will most incorrect to heaven, a heart unfortified, a mind impatient, an understanding simple and unschooled. You're being stupid, in other words. You're not being reasonable. For what we know must be and is as common as any the most vulgar thing to sense. Why should we in our peevish opposition take it to heart? Fie, 'tis a fault to heaven, a fault against the dead, a fault to nature, to reason most absurd, whose common theme is death of fathers, and who still hath cried from the first course till he that died today. This must be so. We pray you, throw to earth this unprevailing woe, and think of us as of a father. Hamlet, you are spending too much time being sad. Man up. You're being unnatural. Everything must die, etc., etc. You're not being in line with nature. The irony is Claudius, we know, is a murderer. We find out, and he is anything but aligned with nature. And here he is, accusing Hamlet of being misaligned with nature. Again, if you know a little bit about the play now, or if you know the story, and some people did know the story because it was an old story. It came from, Shakespeare's source was from an ancient, I think some Scandinavian, I have to double check my notes on this, but it was a Scandinavian myth, a revenge story. Hamlet is the only one around who knows or who senses and realizes, or he's right now coming to realize, and he's sensing something is wrong, something is out of sync, and he also is perhaps about to become aware of the fact that his job is going to be to set things right. What might that mean? It's going to be revenge. He's going to have to take out Claudius. But is Hamlet a murderer? He's not. He's a gentleman. He is a Renaissance man. He's a student. He's studying at Wittenberg. We find out later. He's a philosopher. He's an actor. He's a lover of the arts. He is anything but a warrior like his father. He's in the new school, if you will. It's very applicable to today in a way. When you think of people like, especially like my father, who was maybe a hippie while his father fought in World War II. Hamlet might fit that sort of analogy where he is this student, he's a scholar, he's not a fighter, he's a lover. But Hamlet's father was a warrior and known for that. All right, so Hamlet says, okay, Mom, whatever, I'll do my best to obey you. And let's see, I'm just looking at Claudius and Gertrude leave and exeunt all but Hamlet. Here he is alone, and this is his first soliloquy, and this is some of the greatest Shakespeare that you're going to read, unquestionably among scholars. All of Hamlet's speeches are fantastic, highly introspective, philosophical, artful, full of poetic devices, and just pleasant to read and worth memorizing, and emotional, highly emotional. Hamlet is very modern in that regard, in the way that he explores the interior world of his emotions. And here he is wishing he could die. He says, "Oh, that this too solid flesh would melt, thaw, and resolve itself into a dew." Okay, too solid flesh. Things that are solid are vulnerable to being nicked at. Pain. Okay, solid flesh means pain. He wants that to melt away, to resolve and evaporate. Or, an alternative, that the everlasting, meaning God in capitals, had not fixed his canon meaning laws, or if that everlasting had not fixed his canon against self-slaughter. Oh God, God. I'm not going to go into the dramatics of this, how Hamlet might say this, but what he's saying here is, I wish God didn't make it against the rules to kill yourself. And then he goes into talking about his distaste for the world, how weary, stale, flat, and unprofitable seem to me all the uses of this world. Fie on it. Like, that might be, in modern English, F it. Okay? Life, 'tis an unweeded garden that grows to seed. Things rank and gross in nature possess it merely. Garden. What are you thinking of if you're reading literature like a professor? Garden of Eden, the fall of man. The Garden of Eden has become overgrown. Paradise no longer exists. Denmark is the garden. And in Denmark, things rank and gross in nature possess it. That it should come to this, but 2 months dead, nay, not so much, not 2. So here we get the details. It's only been a couple of months since his father has died and his mother is married. So excellent a king, his father, that was to this Hyperion to a satire. As in, a Hyperion is like the super titan, I think, and a satire is this sort of like weird goaty mythical creature, and that's Claudius. So loving to my mother that he might not beteem the winds of heaven visit her face too roughly. Heaven and earth must I remember. The love between his mother and father is totally gone. Why should we hang on him, as if increase of appetite had grown by what it fed on, and yet within a month, let me not think on it Frailty, thy name is woman. Again, well, not again, but here, a famous quote. Hamlet is known for his misogynistic traits. He says women are frail. He is calling his mother Gertrude frail, as in her will is not strong enough to resist becoming married to Claudius. And then he goes on to say the shoes that she wore to the funeral, let's see, a little month or ere those shoes were old, with which she followed my poor father's body, like Niobe all tears. Why, she, even she, O God, a beast that mourns discourse of reason would have mourned longer. He's saying that man has reason, beasts, animals don't, but even a beast would have mourned longer. More mythological allusions. And then we talked about this line, ere yet that the salt of most unrighteous tears had left the flushing in her galled eyes, she married, O most wicked speed, to post with such dexterity to incestuous sheets. It is, nor it cannot come to good, but break my heart, for I must hold my tongue. So Hamlet holds his tongue. Okay, he has to stop with his complaining, his his feelings about his mother, his negativity towards women that is emerging here, his really visceral reaction to the way that his world has changed. And I think you could all identify that with the exercise that we did. He has to put all that on hold and then put up appearances. His friend Horatio, and he says, he changes gears. He's like, I am glad to see you well, Horatio, or do I forget myself? The same, my lord, and your poor servant ever. Sir, my good friend, I'll change that name with you. And what make you from Wittenberg, Horatio? Marcellus? Okay, so he's being friendly, and he's happy to see his friend Horatio, the only one that Hamlet is ever going to be able to really fully trust throughout the play. They tell him about the ghost, and Horatio does that here, saying we were Marcellus and Bernardo at the watch. We were visited in the middle of the night. Again, midnight is very connotative, the witching hour, like I said. Been thus encountered by a ghost, a figure like your father, armed at point exactly, cap a pay, I think meaning something to do with armor and carrying like a sword. And Hamlet is very interested in this account. Did you not speak to it? My lord, I did, but it didn't answer me. Hamlet says it's very strange. And so they make a plan that, here comes the bell, that Hamlet is going to go and talk to the ghost, and that happens in Act 1, Scene 4 and 5, I believe, covered in the other video. So that concludes Act 1, Scene 2.